First, our graduation speaker, who is a distinguished alumnus, Dr. Turner Whitted. As a researcher and former manager at Microsoft Research, Dr. Turner Whitted has explored topics in hardware devices, human-computer interactions, and computer graphics. He was a member of the computer science faculty at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill from 1983 until 2001, as well as a co-founder and director of Numerical Design Limited. Prior to that, he was a member of the technical staff at Bell Labs Computer Systems Research Laboratory, where he introduced the notion of using recursive ray tracing to implement global illumination. He earned bachelor's and master's degrees from Duke University and a PhD from North Carolina State University, all in electrical engineering. In the past, Dr. Whitted has served on the editorial boards of the IEEE Computer Graphics and Applications and ACM Transactions on Graphics, and was papers chair for SIGGRAPH 97, the major international conference in computer graphics. He is a fellow of the Association for Computing Machinery and a member of the National Academy of Engineering. And I would just insert that election to the National Academy of Engineering is one of the highest professional honors accorded to an engineer. He is truly known as one of the pioneers in three-dimensional computer graphics. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Turner Whitted.
Thank you, Dr. Stansel, for that introduction, and a special thank you to this year's graduates for allowing me to share this experience with you. I know it's a major transition for you. This is the time when you stop worrying about grades and exams and start worrying about your career path and climbing that so-called ladder of success. It's the time when you stop being an engineering student and when you start to be an engineer. But if I know most of you, you were an engineer long before, at least in your own mind, long before you set foot in the classrooms here at NC State. I know I felt the same way. I remember being a 14-year-old geek who I checked a book out of the library called Electrons, Waves, and Messages. It was written by John R. Pierce, and he described this magical place called Bell Laboratories where researchers invented things like the traveling wave tube or radio astronomy or the transistor. And this description of the research environment just absorbed me and became a passion. In fact, ultimately, it became my dream. Now, if you fast forward a few years, dreams get tempered by reality. And that's true for all of us. As I was approaching graduation, to be at the point where you are now, I was hampered a little bit by what my dean called a puzzling academic record. So I thought the prudent thing to do in that case was to continue for an additional year to get a master's degree, not because of any love of learning on my part or because of any real desire to jump into research, but I badly needed a bandage to cover over my puzzling undergraduate record. So I spent 2 semesters in classwork, and when I finished the classwork, I went to work for Western Electric Company up in Winston-Salem, working in the thin film manufacturing facility and continuing to work on my master's degree. And within weeks of completing the master's degree, I was drafted into the Army. So not only had I voluntarily taken a 1-year delay in entering my career, now I was involuntarily taking an additional 2-year delay. The Army was good to me. They gave me an assignment as an engineer, although with the rank of private and pay at 1/10 of my civilian salary. Within 18 months, the Army decided that they had drafted too many of us, and they let us out early. So I came back to Western Electric 6 months early, unexpectedly. They weren't prepared for me to come back, so they said, we're going to temporarily assign you to Bell Labs over in Greensboro. And this isn't the Bell Labs that I read about earlier on. This is not the magical Area 10 research division. This was one of the advanced development groups, in this case building sonar signal processing for the Navy. And I went over there for this 6-week assignment, and it was a wonderful job. Amazing what you can learn as an engineer designing test, and then designing test equipment, and then designing the equipment to be tested, and then designing systems, and then actually deploying them into the field. So it's, to see the entire range is a wonderful experience. I also, during, as this 6-week assignment expanded to 3 years, I realized it wasn't temporary anymore. And I looked at the people around me, remarkable group of people. I noticed that the colleagues who had PhD degrees seemed to get the more challenging job assignments. My wife made the observation that the colleagues with PhDs also lived in nicer houses. And she and I discussed this at length for months, until she finally just said, "When are you going to stop talking about getting a PhD and just do it?" So that's how I ended up here at NC State. And I, again, burdened by that problematic undergraduate record, I sort of crept in the back door. I would take courses part-time for a couple semesters, and eventually worked up enough of enough confidence to apply for the PhD program in the Department of Electrical Engineering. And with the help of some highly supportive professors who I owe a great debt to, I was accepted. Now, coming into the PhD program turned my academic world completely upside down. The courses were no longer requirements. The courses were a portal into explanations of why everything worked. It was like light shining through a door. The research, which was a basic element of the academic program, became more than just an element of the program. It became a passion. In fact, I probably stayed here a year longer than I should have, because the research just kept going and going. But ultimately, I wrote a dissertation and defended it. And about the time I was ready to graduate, the recruiters from Bell Laboratories visited the campus and said, "How would you like to come back?" And I explained to them, "I don't think so. I'm ready to move on. That's the past. I want to look at the future." And they added to their sales pitch, "Well, come interview and hang out with your old buddies and find out what's been going on since you've been gone." Well, that was a no-brainer. That was a very easy idea to follow up on. So I did. I went to the interview, and in the middle of the interview trip, I ran into one of my former colleagues. He said, "So let's look at your interview schedule." And I have to admit, I hadn't looked at my interview schedule. I wasn't really paying a lot of attention to it. And as he went down the list, he noted that, "Oh, wow, you have an interview with the research division, the famous Area 10. I have to confess, I wasn't prepared for this. All of a sudden, I was a 14-year-old geek all over again. The only difference is that my dream wasn't remote. It wasn't locked up in the pages of a library book. The dream was right in my face and where I could reach out and touch it. And the only reasonable decision there is to say yes to the dream, which I did. The fantasy surrounding that dream doesn't begin to keep up with the reality that followed. I would not trade it for anything in the world. Now, that's a long, rambling, meandering, chaotic, and somewhat interruption-filled story. What's it got to do with those of you who are ready to go out, follow your career path, or climb that ladder of success that we talk about? And the answer is, there really isn't any ladder of success. The engineering discipline is a big rocky, hilly environment where you walk up and you climb hand over hand up a cliff, and you get to the top and you look out over the horizon and you see another hill that's either a little higher or a little greener, and you jump off your current cliff and walk over and climb the next one, and you just keep doing it for your whole career. What about that mythical career path that people try to guide you to? Let me point out something. You are graduating from one of the premier engineering schools in the world. You have the skill and the knowledge to create, to invent, to design, to build. You're qualified better than anybody else to determine what that path is going to be. You know what your inner dream is better than anybody else will know. So it doesn't matter to me whether that path is a rocket-powered straight line to the stratosphere, or whether you decide to meander around the wilderness like I did. Keep that dream in your sights. Whether it's off in the distance or whether it's staring you in the face. What I'm asking you is to say yes to your dream. Thank you.